Hello, everyone. My name is Julianne Meyer, and I am the host of Own Your Wellness. Happy almost New Year. I cannot believe the end of 2021 is upon us. Oh, my goodness. It went by surprisingly fast for me. My goodness. But anyway, enough about that. I am excited for today's guest because we're going to talk about some fun, interesting things that are really going to help you focus where your attention needs to go, as well as how to talk to yourself. And I am so excited about this. Let's bring him on. His name is Luke Chao. Hello, welcome.
Hello, Julie. Thank you for having me, and happy almost New Year to you and to your listeners.
I'm excited. I was just thinking because I had last year a gentleman named Barry Shore, who's known as the ambassador of joy for New Year's. And we taped right before New Year's. And it took me about 6 months to get the confetti out of my apartment. Oh my goodness, it was crazy. But anyway, enough about that. We're here to speak with you and learn from you. So I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your own wellness journey.
Sure. Well, I guess like many people, my wellness journey kind of began early on in life. And I wouldn't say I was really a happy kid, but I did love to read. And I read a lot. I read a lot of philosophy. I read a lot about psychology. And somewhere in my readings, I kind of found out about hypnosis, which, like for many other teenagers, seemed like the magic solution to all of my problems. And of course, one of the first things you learn is that it's not mind control. But at least my interest was piqued early on in life. I ended up with a degree in English literature. Famously, there are no obvious career paths after an English lit degree. So I kind of looked at everything I was interested in and everything that people were paying money for and everything I could plausibly do well. And hypnotherapy was kind of right in the intersection of those three things. So at the age of 23, I came back from a meditation retreat with a pretty clear head and little fear. So I took advantage of that window. And 2 weeks later, I rented out literally this office. So that was 15 years and a few months ago.
Oh, wow.
And I've been here ever since. And in these past 15 years, I've had over 7,000 clients walk in through the doors. We've trained a few dozen people. I've launched a handful of careers. And I'm very proud of the work that me and my clients and my associates and employees have done.
That is amazing. And you know what? I'm going to ask a most basic question to start things rolling. What exactly is hypnosis?
Good question. So formally, the word hypnosis refers to the state of mind where your attention is turned inwardly. You will be more relaxed. And in that state, it's easier to accept new ideas. I'll liken it kind of like to guided meditation. In my opinion, guided meditation is a non-threatening way to say hypnosis.
Oh,
In
okay.
my opinion, meditation is when no one is interrupting your thoughts with their own speech. And once you add guidance to meditation, you're kind of changing it into a somewhat different practice. And that practice happens to look an awful lot like hypnosis. So, hypnosis is also colloquially the term for the practice of hypnotism, or how a hypnotist might use their words, their verbal suggestions, to affect their clients for the better.
So I know that you take on more of a science approach as opposed to a spiritual avenue while practicing
Mhm.
hypnosis. I'm curious how you help clients. What is it? What would somebody come to you for?
Good question. Well, hypnotherapists in the decades preceding the founding of my office kind of set themselves up so that we get a lot of clients for weight loss and we get a lot of clients for smoking cessation and we get a lot of clients for fears and phobias. So those three issues are the most common. But any issue that's within the realm of mind over matter or the mind body link, um, any issue that's within the realm of attitude or perspective change, I can probably help with. And some people do underestimate how much falls under the umbrella of what is affected by a perspective change or what is affected by the mind-body link. Um, but that's how I kind of summarize what I do. When it comes to spirituality, I'm not against spirituality.
Mhm.
I just kind of see it as a separate matter from the reasons that most of my clients come in for. But of course, every practitioner will end up attracting the people who seem to fit best with their practice. And I think that there's no conflict between science and spirituality because science studies the objective, what
Mhm.
we can see from the outside, and not so much what we feel on the
Mhm.
inside. And I think much of the reason hypnotherapy and spirituality often combine is because both hypnotism and spirituality kind of deal with inner experience. And that is the realm I work in, which is a little bit outside the realm of where science usually looks.
I'm really glad that you said that too, because I've never felt like it has to be either or, It's kind of like health in general. If you don't have one piece, it throws everything else off. So, I mean, it's not like we live in a roll top desk where you can pull out one little drawer and close it back up and that, it's not how life works. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I just love though that you can practically help people because that's what I and this is a totally sidebar, but so I kind of feel like is missing from spirituality is the actual practical application of things from time to time. So that's all fine and dandy, but I want to know how to use all this knowledge.
Mhm.
So
Yep. Well,
I love that.
you've heard of sort of the triad mind, body, and spirit.
Exactly.
So yes, it matters. It matters a lot, and it goes along with mind and body. But of course, the body is what kind of takes the inner world and puts it into action in the world out here.
Exactly. So you mentioned the importance of a mind body connection. And how would that affect things? Like, I mean, I know what I think, but I want to hear what your answer is
Yep.
because, for me, it could go either way. Like you
Yep.
can affect the inner world with the outer world and vice versa.
Yes. So within the realm of the subjective or what's in the mind, and you might even lump spirituality in with the mind, but within the realm of thoughts and imagination, often because it's not visible to a physician or it's not visible to a
Mhm.
scientific experimenter or researcher, it kind of just gets overlooked. And yet we all live within our own subjective experiences of the world. None of us kind of perceive objectively the world as it is. We all just kind of
Mhm.
live within our subjective perspectives. And that's the realm that a hypnotherapist would work in. And that's why the mind body link affects so many things. So when we go through our earlier years of schooling, we're kind of taught to speak to others kindly, and we're
Mhm.
taught to forgive others, and we're taught to treat others well so that we grow up to be good members of society. Somehow along that journey, we aren't taught, or we aren't taught enough to also treat ourselves well, to treat ourselves kindly, to treat ourselves, in summary, to the same standard by which
Mhm.
we treat our friends and family. And what it means is many people's internal dialogue is critical, harsh, or even outright abusive, where things you might tell yourself you would never, ever speak out loud to anyone else. And the reason we're taught to speak to others kindly and supportively is because it makes the world a better place and it makes them happier and a society functions better. But the way you talk to yourself makes a huge difference as to the quality of your life. You have a relationship not just with others, you have a
Mhm.
relationship with yourself. And that relationship is largely mediated by the words you pick to speak to yourself. So if you keep telling yourself that you're going to fail, or if you keep telling yourself that everything's terrible, if you keep telling yourself things you wouldn't say to others because they'll be harmful to others, well, then you're harming yourself,
Mhm.
and unnecessarily, because in the privacy of your head and heart, you can be kind and supportive and encouraging and add to the happiness and love in the universe without taking. I think it's a false idea that one who's kind to oneself is taking from their kindness toward others. I think it's more truthful that where it flows freely to everybody. So, one way I kind of summarize it as a single rule to uphold for my clients is that if they uphold one single standard for how they treat a person, including themselves, then um, they're upholding a very good standard.
So I'm guessing that that's kind of where you come in too, because we're, as you said, we're not really taught these things. So you build these neural pathways, and then your brain just automatically does this. It's just, it
Yep.
automatically starts thinking these thoughts. You're
Yep.
automatically mean to yourself, all these automatic things. So is it fair to say that you help rebuild neural pathways in a quicker way, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not a neurologist or a neuroscientist, so I can't give you the studies to say, whether I'm creating new neural pathways. I suspect yes, but before I claim, so I'll just make that disclaimer. So to put it in terms where I'm just kind of talking about subjectivity, or the realm that I kind of work in, and the realm that the client can kind of directly experience. Um, I'm guiding the client through their inner world. I'm connecting them with some of their better thoughts and better feelings. I'm giving them a first or at least an early experience where they're speaking more supportively to themselves, where they might be speaking more kindly, or I don't like to use the term positive thinking because it often feels like positive thinking is when you look in the mirror and lie to yourself. I like to see it as recognition of the reassuring truths, recognition of the empowering truths, recognition of the inspiring truths. So I'm leading the client sort of through their inner world so that they can kind of have an early experience of being coached to talk to themselves supportively and encouragingly and positively. They themselves can see it's not making them narcissistic. It's not making them into arrogant jerks. In between sessions, they'll also kind of take the lessons instilled in the session and apply them to their life. And they'll still see that because I'm kind of grounding the client in the truths, that good things come of better self-talk. And just like you can improve a friendship by being nicer to your friend, you can also improve your relationship with yourself just by being nicer to yourself. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of what I'm doing with my
Well,
clients.
it does. And, I appreciate your disclaimer as well, because just because you can't necessarily prove it doesn't mean it's true. Like, how did they, gravity existed before they could prove it, you know?
Yep.
So, yeah, I think we're definitely talking about the same sort of thing. And, something else I was thinking about is that, for those people that are watching and are thinking, well, if I'm not mean to myself, then I won't, they use it as they think of like a
Mhm.
pep talk or
Yep.
something. But I'm like, if that worked, then we'd all be thin, rich,
Yes.
all these other
Yes.
things.
But it doesn't work. It doesn't work for your friends.
No.
It doesn't work for your family. It doesn't work for your colleagues, and it doesn't work for
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
It's actually legitimate to uphold one standard for how you talk to a person and just assume that something that's cruel when spoken to another is also cruel when spoken to yourself. And something helpful when spoken to another is helpful when spoken to yourself. I know I'm talking myself out of a job. Like once this spreads far and wide, I'll be out of a job. But that'll be a good day, in my opinion. The world will be better off if people are kinder to themselves. And like I said, kindness flows freely to others where it flows freely to oneself. But the corollary is true too, where if one is hard on oneself, one also tends to be hard on others.
As within, so without.
Mhm.
That old Bible saying, and I don't really know the Bible that well at this point in my life, but I will say that, the thing about treating your neighbors, I would never want to.
There you go.
If I treated my neighbors like I, treat myself, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, it would be World War III. No, it's
So
true.
it gives you some clues then as to, how you can immediately improve the quality of your life. It's not just treat others as you would treat yourself, it's also
Yeah,
treat yourself as you would treat others. That's the other half
exactly.
of upholding a singular standard for how you talk to a person. So,
Yes.
if any of your listeners are thinking, hey, there is a discrepancy between how I talk to others and how I talk to myself, immediately that tells you which thoughts you actually don't have to keep, which thoughts you already recognize to be harmful.
So, how does somebody can they do self hypnosis, or is this kind of work something that somebody should do with somebody else?
Good question. Um, so, it's always beneficial to kind of have like a guide or a teacher.
Hmm.
It's, I would say, not always necessary to have a guide or a teacher, just like one can learn to play the piano by oneself, but one also benefits from having a piano instructor. One can learn
Hmm.
golf by oneself, but it benefits to hire a golf coach. To kind of, to introspect and just sort out the worthy thoughts from the thoughts that are more worth discarding. It can be expedited by engaging with a professional. It's not absolutely necessary. The self-reflection is not just for those with the means to hire professionals. Um, you know, part of my intent coming onto a show like this is to kind of give some tips and some pointers so that someone who's listening doesn't necessarily have to hire a professional to benefit from some of these perspectives. I mean, you already kind of hold your tongue before cursing out your neighbor, right? You didn't really
Oh
need to be hypnotized to hold
yeah.
your tongue before cursing out a neighbor and to find nicer words instead. You don't need a hypnotist to hold yourself back from being self-critical, even if it's more
Mhm.
familiar, and to kind of begin changing how you talk to yourself inside your head.
So how can somebody start to change that behavior? Because I would say the first step is recognizing it,
Yep.
but then how do you get to the pause, or does it take a while?
Good question. So, the work that meditators do, and I don't mean guided meditation. I mean like sitting quietly to be
Mhm.
with one's own thoughts. That's kind of a first step to being aware of your thoughts. That's kind of a first step to also recognizing that you're not your thoughts, and thoughts will
Mhm.
come and go, and you can't just kind of let them go with no consequence. But kind of when you're sitting with your own thoughts, you'll also notice that you can sort of talk to yourself inside your head the same way that when you read a book, you can kind of talk to yourself inside your head as you read the book.
Mhm.
And that's one of the ways that you might start kind of changing the internal dialogue inside your head. I don't think it requires special guidance or special techniques. I think that it's something that most people are able to do. Obviously, some people do have certain thought patterns deeply ingrained. Obviously, some
Mhm.
people are more self-reflective than others, and some people might benefit from outside guidance more than others. But I definitely don't want to kind of suggest that one has to hire a professional or else it's not worth doing. I want to promote
Yeah.
the idea instead that this is something that everyone can do.
And I love that too, because like you said, you don't have to, but also how dedicated are you? How important is it to you? Is it a priority? I'm a personal trainer as well. So nobody needs a personal trainer typically.
No, but they hire you
However,
anyway
yeah.
because they see the benefit,
Yeah,
because you speed
exactly.
things along.
Exactly. And, I can watch out for things that they're not going to see and help them
Mhm.
see things that they haven't seen. So it's the same idea with anything. And it's just that's why, we don't live on an island by ourselves anyway. And sometimes
Yeah,
it's nice to have mirrors and have people show us things that we
yeah.
just can't see, at
And
least right away.
And some people have really good friends who'll sometimes do a better job than a therapist you hire for a few months. Some
Hmm.
people have like really good, reliable, dependable people with their heads screwed on straight who are good people to talk to and to be influenced by. One thing I say to all of my clients is that, um, well, one, learning doesn't end at 18 or 25 or 30. And two, for the rest of your life, you do get to choose your influences. You
Hmm.
don't have to keep all the unchosen influences you had accumulated while growing up. You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose the neighborhood you grew up in. You didn't choose the school you went to, most likely.
Hmm.
And they all influence you nonetheless. But as an adult, you can choose which books you read. You can choose which podcasts you listen to. You can choose your influences. And it isn't just hypnotists with ideas that kind of resonate with people. It's not just hypnotists who will kind of communicate points in ways that just kind of make sense and are easy to accept. I think any good speaker, any good thinker who communicates well is going to be sharing some ideas worth keeping.
So my next question, it's a little tiny bit out of the scope of what we're talking about, but I think it's extremely relevant. And that is, you know, whenever we are learning how to speak kindly to ourselves, and basically it is, like I mentioned, the science part of it, reprogramming our brain.
Mhm,
There's certain things that you can do, like, maybe watching a death show, like something, murder show is probably not going to be the best idea, but you could watch something positive. You could watch
mhm.
something funny. You could read something inspirational. So what are some things that have, like, maybe books or podcasts, or what has inspired you to have more positive thoughts and feelings?
Good question. The twist at the end was that it came back to me, and it's not like what I recommend to clients. So um, I guess for myself, um, I am a reader. I do read quite a bit. Um, I do listen to a lot of music, and I think music more than books, more than even poetry. Music kind of speaks to one's emotions or touches or uplifts or moves or inspires one's emotions in quite a direct way.
Hmm.
Um, Also, sometimes stories, art, visual art,
Yeah.
nature can inspire and uplift. When we're open to it, we can actually be influenced by just so much that's around us, yet we
Hmm.
take everything many of us take so much of what's around us for granted.
Hmm.
Like something like my cell phone will play almost every song ever recorded. It'll give me access to the world's information. I can read pretty much every book that's ever been published, at least in recent decades, on this
Hmm.
device. I can watch many movies, many shows on this device. I have no reason ever to be bored. And I get to pick which of those songs or which of those movies or which of those books I get to consume. And I happen to know that I'm going to be affected by the song I
Hmm.
listen to. I'm going to be affected by what I watch or what I read or what I listen to. So yeah, I just kind of draw from the abundance of the modern world, and I do my best to pick influences that I think will help me or uplift me or soothe me or comfort me or whatever it is I might need any given moment.
I love that. And something that I was just thinking about, I have a client, and this is something worth mentioning. I train her at her house, and if she's watching, I'm sorry, her place is probably like $10 million, and it's beautiful. It's overlooking the ocean. And she's actually the one that taught me of the phrase mirror effect, that you just get so used to seeing something that you don't see it anymore. I mean, it's like I go there 3 times a week, and I'm like blown away every time. And she's like, "Oh yeah, the ocean. Oh yeah, those are whales."
Mhm,
But if you come at things with a fresh eye, you get to look at things as if you've never seen them before. Then all of a sudden, that opens up your world again as well.
mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I love that. But I love the music too, because that's, a lot of people forget about the importance of that. I mean, how many times, and then it also, it connects us to our memories, things like that as well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's also one of those expressions of culture that
Mhm.
is found in I want to say every culture, but I actually don't know the anthropology on this. So it's either every culture discovered or almost every culture
Mhm.
discovered has dance and music and some form of visual art and some form of storytelling.
Yeah.
I actually tell my clients that exposure to art and music and stories, meaningful stories, is an essential need for
Mm.
human happiness. It's not a luxury. And the reason I say it is because if I ask you or if I ask anyone to imagine a life without stories, without music, without visual art, you would feel deprived, like someone deprives you of food or water. That's what tells me that for human happiness, consumption of these forms of culture is a need.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Woo. On that note, we are going to go to commercial break. All right. I'll see you in just a moment. As I mentioned, it is time for us to go to commercials. For those of you who are watching us live, hello and welcome to the show. And we will be right back in just a minute. Are you someone who is struggling to move forward because you suffered a loss? Maybe you're even finding it difficult to complete the most basic tasks. Are you looking for a way to start enjoying life again without feeling guilty or the resistance to do so? Spiritual life coach Sarah Stockham saw a need for people who haven't learned how to grieve without putting their entire lives on pause. And so she created a program that solves this issue called Choosing Life Right Now. This program is simple and you can do it on your own. If you are ready to learn how to feel your grief while still being able to smile, to honor the sacredness of what took place as a loss, and yet still continue to live with joy, and if you'd like to take care of your whole being with grace and love, then I'd like to invite you to experience her new program called Choosing Life Right Now. Sarah is currently offering her program for the promotional price of $77, but it won't stay at this price for long. To learn more, check out her website. The address is on the screen.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, my name is Julianne Meyer, and I am the host of Own Your Wellness. And today's special guest is Luke Chao. Let's bring him back. Hello, welcome back.
Hello.
So during the commercial break, I was thinking about how when we were speaking earlier, you were saying how you want to bring information, you want to bring tips and tools and things to people that you might not necessarily be able to reach from your office. So what is something that you think is vitally important that is not common knowledge?
Well, it's everything we've been talking about. So the mind-body link being very real, you don't have to meditate on a mountaintop for 20 years before you actually can send quality signals through this link. You can actually sit in your chair right now, tell yourself that you're all right, and feel the consequences or feel the positive consequences of telling yourself you're all right. Um, and I think even just that, when people fully internalize that,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be living a higher quality of life and then affecting those around them for the better. The idea that we talked about right before the break, which is that a life deprived of music and art and stories is a life where some of your needs are not being met. These are ideas that I have been saying one to one with my clients. These are ideas I've just kind of like been mulling over on my own and sharing with clients to impact their own lives and their own perspectives for the better. um, I mean, I could probably think of other examples, but I think we've talked about quite a number of ideas that I think are worth sharing.
Exactly. So then I guess what I want to do is I know that not everybody's going to have the chance to meet you in person, but they can still check out your website, see who you are, what you're about in a little bit further detail. What can they expect to find there?
So this is the website for my business. If you're interested in working with me privately, you could schedule a consultation. As you can probably hear, I'm set up for high quality online sessions. This is my physical office in downtown Toronto, Canada. So that's the website for my business. For people who are interested in just hearing me talk more about the ideas like the ones I've shared here, perhaps my YouTube channel is the best resource where you could potentially hear me talk for hours and hours. There are a few free sample sessions. There's live demonstrations. There's a crash course in how to hypnotize your friends using skills you already have. And the link for that is on the website. In the top right corner, there's like a little tiny YouTube icon,
Oh,
or you
perfect.
could go to YouTube and search for Morpheus Hypnosis.
I love that. So you touched on something that I want to ask actually is, well, there's two things, but first of all, if somebody is wanting to work with somebody, what should they look for?
If they're looking for a hypnotist
Mhm.
specifically, or
Yes.
good question, and I know I'm gonna step on some toes and ruffle some feathers, because I do have some perspectives that are possibly controversial among other practitioners. So just off the top of my head, if I were shopping for a hypnotist myself, the exact certifying body that they're a member of isn't necessarily that significant or shouldn't be the most important thing you look at.
Hmm.
Um, like in personal training, for example, I'm sure there are weekend certifications and there are also multi-week, multi-month, and probably multi-year
Hmm.
trainings. So, having a fancy looking seal or certificate is not necessarily an indication of quality or sound training. Um, I would actually almost not interrogate, but looking for someone to work with you as a hypnotist means you're looking for someone to expand your own thinking. You're looking for someone who is going to ask you to put aside your prior ways of thinking to accept what they are verbalizing.
Hmm.
So more than anything else, if I were shopping for a practitioner, I'd be looking for someone who is kind of a philosopher, someone who does think about how to live a good life, someone who does have a good grounding in morality and ethics, someone who themselves seems to be, fairly happy, fairly mature, fairly well grounded, someone who walks their talk.
Hmm.
um, I would, ask them some pretty probing questions about how they would handle my case. I would look for substantial answers. What I'm looking for is that if I am being hypnotized by them, if I am putting aside my usual ways of thinking to accept what they are saying wholeheartedly, I want their thinking to be better than my own. That's what
Yes.
I'm looking for. High quality thinking that is worth me accepting myself. And then I can trust them to kind of expand upon it. But, I'm not looking for a script reader. I'm not necessarily looking for someone with a good voice or a low price point or a good location, like, the criteria that many people shop with. I think my biggest tip is look for a good thinker who can expand your thinking.
I love that. And it's not one size fits all. So you
Yep.
got to figure out who's going to work best for you. So then, we talked a bit about what hypnosis is, but what is it not? Because I think that that's something that we should touch on as
Yep.
well.
Yep. So, if any of the listeners want to kind of add to my list of common myths, please leave a comment. Or if Julie, if I've missed anything, please let me know. So, it's not mind control.
Mhm.
So someone in hypnosis becomes more suggestible. It's easier to accept new ideas, but I still have to think about how I'm going to expand and improve their thinking because they're not completely suggestible. So
Mhm.
let's say I'm working with a smoker. The stereotype is you hypnotize someone, you tell them they're a non-smoker now, then you emerge them and they're a non-smoker. But that would only make sense if people in hypnosis were entirely suggestible, which they're not. Instead, they're just more suggestible. You still have to kind of give them stepping stones before they see the world as a non-smoker does.
Mm.
So, like, only smokers believe at any time that they ever need a cigarette. Non-smokers never believe they need a cigarette, which is actually the truth for a human being.
Yeah.
Now, people do sometimes need a break. People sometimes do need validation. People sometimes do need some positive self-talk. No one needs a cigarette ever. And everyone who's quit smoking can back that up. So it's not mind control. We do kind of have to think in terms of what perspectives or ideas we want the client to adopt for themselves so that they don't have the problem that they have.
Mm.
So we show non-smokers we show smokers how to think like non-smokers. We show people who have a hard time motivating themselves to go to the gym how to think like someone who does get up at 6 a.m. every morning and they
Mhm.
actually do motivate themselves. Um, Another myth is that hypnosis is sleep. And part of the reason I think is that the word hypnosis derives from the Greek word for sleep.
Hmm.
Um, but it's only from the outside that someone who's being hypnotized has the appearance of someone who's asleep. The internal experience is um, usually quite vivid, quite immersive, and often quite emotional. So on the outside, they look, just relaxed and peaceful, but there's a lot going on in their inner world. So it's not sleep. It's better described as a very immersive, eyes closed daydream, or it's better described as a half awake, half asleep state of mind. Another myth is that hypnosis somehow tricks people or deceives people into believing the things that they do. And I think this comes from stage hypnosis, where people are kind of induced to believe that they're a dog, or they're induced to believe that, like, they're a hurricane or whatever fantasy the hypnotist suggests in the volunteers' minds. But I want to point out that no one goes back home after a show still believing they're a dog. No one still believes that they're a force of nature by the time they get back home. And it's the skill set of a stage hypnotist is kind of to trick people into believing
Mhm.
strange things, bizarre things. But it always wears off when the bizarre belief is confronted with reality. The things I'm convincing my clients of are things that reality backs up. So the fact
Mhm.
that you don't need a cigarette, but sometimes you need a break, this is
Mhm.
not a fantasy. This is
Yes.
something that they can go out and see for themselves is actually the truth. So, hypnosis done poorly might involve deceit, or hypnosis done for just pure entertainment value might, involve sort of trickery or deceit. But suggestions that are to last for a client's lifetime, must be truthful. They must be validated by the client's life afterward for them to stick long term. So I think that covers some common misconceptions. I don't know if you, Julie, or if any listeners have anything else to suggest or anything.
Nobody suggested anything in particular, but what I'm curious about, because this is what it keeps popping into my head, because I was supposedly hypnotized once when I was young, but to me, it was just, I didn't think that I was, but would I know if I was?
It's an interesting question, and I have several answers to that, and they kind of relate to how I practice hypnosis, so they might or might not apply to how your hypnotist practiced hypnosis.
Gotcha.
So, the broadest answer I could give is that, like guided meditation, if you're kind of focused inward and you are relaxed and you get some kind of positive benefit, then you've passed the threshold where it counts as being really hypnotized. I'm a bit more specific than that, because I think partly because the clientele I attract, they can be more demanding. With love in my heart, I say that. So at the beginning of a session, there's something called the hypnotic induction, which is how you get the client to kind of put aside their usual way of thinking and then accept what the hypnotist is saying. And I use an induction called the Element Induction, ELMAN. It's been around for a while. It's quite popular and it's quite good. The Element Induction includes a couple of built-in tests. Now, if we kind of see hypnosis or define hypnosis as a state of mind where you take to new ideas more readily, we can test for hypnosis by giving clients new ideas, even bizarre ideas, to take on temporarily. So the Element Induction has a couple of tests. The first is, can you accept the idea that your eyelids are so soft that they just don't work? Even when you try to open them, they don't work. It's kind of like a stage hypnosis kind of test, but to me, it means from the outside, I can see that someone who hasn't put aside their critical mind will open their eyes. Someone who has put aside their critical mind to accept what I've said will have their eyes stay shut. The next test that I do, the formal Element Induction has another step, but I don't physically reach across and touch clients, so especially during the pandemic. So I kind of bypassed that in between step. But the third test in the Element Induction is you have the client begin a countdown from 100 going down. You have them begin to relinquish the need or desire to kind of continue to the next number. The natural inclination for every modern human being is to go from 100 down to 1 and not skip a single one and be proud of it. So it's meaningful when someone actually loses count. It's meaningful when someone counts the same number 3 times or goes up and then down and isn't even aware that they've miscounted. So that's also showing me the client's in an altered state of consciousness. Again, not everyone uses an induction like this that has built-in tests. But if I and the client both want to be satisfied that they are measurably hypnotized in some kind of objectively measurable way, I'll use the Element Induction. After the session's over, the most common reports of the client's experience are that time feels like it flew by. So a 50-minute session might feel only like 15 minutes. That's a dependable sign that the client was hypnotized, that they were in an altered state. Another dependable sign is almost everyone will feel either heaviness or lightness in their bodies. So, I've given you kind of like 4 tests, two at the start, 2 at the end. The more of these the client hits, the more we could say they were really hypnotized.
I love that. I like it to be measurable instead of just maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. I can definitely say that I've self-hypnotized before, for sure. Absolutely. So something that I was thinking about too, and it kind of goes back to something you and I were talking about, is that, let's say somebody comes to you and they are able to set aside their thinking and use yours. I want to mention too that they are allowed to change their mind again at some point.
Yep. Yep.
as they grow and they change, maybe something new would be a better paradigm.
Yes. So my role in my clients' lives is fairly short term. It's fairly limited. Hypnotists kind of developed a reputation for rapid change. So if someone engages with a psychologist or a psychotherapist, they kind of expect the relationship to last for months or years. If
Mhm.
someone engages with a hypnotist, the expectation is the relationship lasts for a few weeks. And if I'm lucky, they're not thinking it's going to be one session and they're done. So, um,
There's another myth.
I mean, it does happen. It does happen. 1 hour of careful listening to good ideas that the client really takes to can actually make a significant difference. It's just not an expectation we like to set up front. If it
Yeah.
happens, the client's lucky. They're super lucky. We congratulate them, but we, tell people a higher number up front, and that way, our clients are happy when it's only, say, 3 sessions or maybe sometimes two or sometimes one session. But
Oh, no, no, go ahead. Go ahead,
yeah,
finish. Sorry. I was
but
just
yeah.
thinking something, but I want to finish. I wanted you to finish.
Well, I want to address the point that the ideas I suggest to the client are not the be all and end all worldview or perspective for them to adopt. Now, I endeavor for everything I say to be helpful, but in the future, because I mean, society changes, we
Mhm.
learn more about humanity each passing year. Cultural norms change. A person is supposed to discard thoughts and ideas and worldviews that no longer serve them or those around them.
Mhm.
They're supposed to kind of change with the times. They're supposed to kind of be lifelong learners because we're all capable of it. And,
Mhm.
everyone's lives are better off when we're kind of adapting to the times. So yeah, I definitely don't want the the client to kind of, accept everything I say completely wholeheartedly as the absolute truth, almost with religious fervor. Instead, I see myself as someone who'll kind of share some helpful ways of thinking to get them out of a rut. And the world's going to keep backing up what I say. But if in the future the world changes, then the world's going to stop backing up what I say. And that's the right time to let go of the belief.
Oh, I love that. Something else that I was thinking about is I know that you help people with fears and overcoming things like that. And, when it comes to like a therapist or a psychiatrist, psychologist, all of that is they always want to get to the root of things. And there isn't always a known root. You don't necessarily I mean, obviously you can still get over something without necessarily knowing why it happened in the first place.
Yes, so there are different schools of thought. So within psychotherapy, within hypnotherapy or psychology, there are different schools of thought. I guess the closest school of thought in the psychology world that I subscribe to would be the positive psychology,
Mhm.
where the idea is you don't necessarily have to look at what's wrong. You don't necessarily have to look at the problem. You just
Mhm.
have to kind of take on the helpful or empowering or reassuring perspectives that someone who doesn't have your problem might have. So positive psychology studies healthy thinking as opposed to psychopathology. Um, Sorry, there was a question in there that I was in the middle of answering. Could you remind me of the question you asked, Julie?
Oh, I was just asking about if we necessarily really need to find out the reason why
Thank,
something started.
Thank you. So, no, my entire practice is actually built around the idea that, in ways backed up by positive psychology, we don't always have to be looking at the root cause or the problem. I'm going to
Mhm.
refer to the fear of public speaking because about 80% of the adult population has a fear of public speaking. What
Mhm.
this means is confident public speakers are abnormal. Fearful public speakers are the
Normal.
norm.
Yep.
Are they all traumatized? I mean, possibly the school system could have done that to them, but possibly it's just a normal thing to be anxious before getting in front of all your peers and sharing your deepest thoughts.
Mhm.
So, when I work with this fear specifically, we don't we no longer look at the past. We no longer look for a so-called root cause.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I'm teaching the client the thinking of a confident public speaker. Primarily, it's public speaking, especially as an adult, is an act of leadership and power. It's not an act of vulnerability or exposure like when you were a child. As an adult, you're the expert in the room. It's an act of leadership, it's an act of power. And that's the truth.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I was just thinking though about how, when we focus on what we don't want, we get more of that. So if we can change our thinking, like you said, and actually start thinking like a positive, confident leader in
Mhm.
the realm of public speaking, then that's what you get.
Yes, when you see yourself as a leader, when you take the stage, you are seeing yourself the way your audience does. You
Hmm.
aren't deluding yourself by thinking that you're in a leadership position when 100 people are following your thought process. You're actually seeing yourself truthfully when you
Yes.
see yourself as a leader.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I don't know why I feel compelled to say this, but typically when somebody is speaking, most people aren't looking for the mistakes. Most people aren't looking to watch you fail, aren't,
Yep.
gunning for that.
The
So,
truth is on your side. Like
yeah.
whatever issue people present to me with, in most cases, the problem is caused by a misperception of the actuality of their circumstances.
Hmm.
In most cases, being grounded in the truth takes care of the problem. Whether it's smoking, fear of public speaking, taking care of yourself in any way, the truth is on your side.
So you mentioned about motivation before, like motivating yourself to go to the gym. Is that really what stops people from doing things? Do you think it's motivation or is it something
Well,
else?
it's a good question. I use the word motivation because often it's sort of the word that clients use. They say
Hmm.
they lack motivation.
Yeah.
In some cases, people's sleep cycles just don't line up with an early rise. In some
Hmm.
cases, it's not that they're lazy, it's just that their bodies are built to wake up later in the morning, and,
Hmm.
for them to schedule accordingly is the more prudent path than forcing them to wake up early against their natural circadian rhythm. So, so to answer the question, it's not all motivation, but if we kind of, look at something like, motivation to exercise, in some cases, it's appreciating that it's not just dogs and children who need exercise. Also, adult human beings are made happier with regular exercise. It's not just hamsters who need wheels to run on, but if you've got a treadmill, I mean, it's going to make
Yeah.
you happier too. Um, in some cases, it's appreciating your own aliveness. The way
Hmm.
where if you will walk your dog, but you won't put on your own shoes without your dog to take a walk, to treat yourself at least as well as your dog, is to recognize your own aliveness and your own needs. So yeah, it's not all motivation. So sometimes it's some other thing that I might target, but it often
Hmm.
presents as lack of motivation.
Exactly. And, I think what I'm hearing you say too is it's a lot about perception, same idea, because, if you can change it into like, this is a loving act for
Mhm.
myself,
Yeah.
or this is something that,
Yeah,
then yeah, all of a sudden that
yeah,
motivation shows up.
to bring it back to kind of the mind-body link or to self-talk, if you're trying to get yourself up in the morning to exercise by telling
Hmm.
yourself you're gonna force yourself to do it, by telling yourself that, you've gotta do it or you're lazy,
Hmm.
you can see how that's gonna keep you in bed or it's gonna bring you back
Yeah.
to sleep. You can also perhaps see how, if you tell yourself that just like adopting a puppy, you're gonna make sure you're gonna get up early in the morning and walk
Whether
that
you,
puppy, you're
yeah.
adopting your own body, and you're gonna get yourself up in the early in the morning to take a run, that you can actually see that working.
Yes. No, I love that. We only have about a minute left. Is there any last thoughts that you'd love to leave with the audience?
Um, I think I said it earlier, but I think that people should really be open to all the positive influences already around them. It's great
Yeah.
to engage with a professional, but you're on the internet right now listening to me. There are other episodes of the show. There are other podcasts. There are other hypnotists or thinkers or writers, and you are a lifelong learner. So,
Very
you know,
good.
the best way to learn is to kind of learn from those who've gone before you or have figured things out before you.
I love that. Luke, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're welcome.
That is all the time that we have, everyone. So we will see you again, hopefully soon. Thank you, Luke.
You're welcome.